and I apologize that there's probably at least 15 to 20 people in the room who have heard me tell the origin of wine in Software Freedom Conservancy more than once, but there are a few people I think have never heard it. Jeremy and I cannot figure out when it was. It was probably 2001 or 2002, after Linux World, we think. We had this meeting. Jeremy showed up with the agenda of trying to find a nonprofit that could take care of wine, because he didn't want co-weavers to be the all-controlling thing. He wanted a charity beside it. And I came with the agenda of convincing him to do exactly what Stallman wanted him to do. I admit I worked for Stallman for 5 years. I was young and naive. But Jeremy says to me, well, you know, the F stuff's fine, but Stallman has all these like language things. You have to say certain words certain ways, and I want a place where wine can go, where we can do all the free software stuff, but don't have to say certain words. So why isn't there a nonprofit like that? And so I came back and reported failure. Then about a year and a half later, I had a conversation with Jeremy Allison, almost exactly the same, about the Samba project. Then 3 years later, I started working with someone named Karen Sandler, who's now our executive director and works with me in Denver. And she started researching the idea of a fiscal sponsorship charity for open source and free software. A very common model for artists and musicians, hadn't been applied yet to FOSS. And she says to me, well, do you think somebody would be interested in this? And now, always in your memory, you sound more clever than you actually sounded. The way I remember it is I said, I have at least 2 Jeremys in line for this thing. So I'm sure there's interest. We should do it. And lo and behold, Wine and Samba were the very first 2 conservancy projects. And it's been a wonderful relationship. I know some of you are being reimbursed by Conservancy. Make sure you send Roseanne receipts and follow the travel policy, and all will be well. I'm going to hand it over to Denver, and he's going to talk about some of the work he does and how it relates to wine.
Thanks very much, Brad. So yes, I'm Denver Gingerich. I work at Software Freedom Conservancy, who, as Bradley noted, is the fiscal sponsor of the Wine Project. So I'll do a little introduction about myself to start things off. So I am the Director of Compliance at Software Freedom Conservancy, which means that I manage the GPL and LGPL enforcement and compliance work that we do. So that means getting people their rights in the software that they use, and these rights are codified in licenses, and so enforcing the licenses gets people these rights. So I'm also a farmer. Well, I was once upon a time, and I assure you this relates to wine. So I grew up on a farm. I did planting, seeding, weeding. I drove the tractor, all of these things. But when I went off to university, I ceased being a farmer. But my parents still farm. And my grandparents actually came from the Netherlands, where they farmed. So it's fitting that I'm here today. And they moved to Canada and continued to farm there. So I talked with my parents regularly about farming. I was actually at my parents' place last weekend, and I was helping my father fix a bike. And he was reminiscing about how easy it is to repair bicycles. They're just such a well-designed tool that we have, and also fitting, I suppose, that I'd be talking about bicycles here. And I knew that the undertone from our other conversations was that the other equipment that he works on is becoming less repairable, and that is a big problem for him, and a big problem for him in farming. So I want to start with another Once Upon a Time that is probably a bit more familiar to you. Once upon a time, there was POSIX, and POSIX was first released in 1988, the standard, and it made software development for various Unix-like operating systems much easier, since there was a standard of sorts. And so this opened up software development a lot. It created a lot more compatibility than there was before, and this was a great thing that software developers now had. Now, around the same time, there was a new operating system that was being developed that had a proprietary API. You probably all know I'm talking about Windows, and developers and users were locked in because the API implementation was proprietary. There was only one implementation, and so developers were stuck because if they wrote to this API, it could only run on this one operating system. And the users who used the programs could not use them on other operating systems. So this was a big problem. However, you fixed that. And by you, I mean all of the Wine developers and contributors, past, present, and future. You fixed this by creating a second implementation of these APIs and ensuring that people could use these programs on other operating systems. So thank you very much for that. Now, this is a wonderful win, but I want us to build on this win. There's another Once Upon a Time, which has a lot of similarities, but I will admit also a lot of differences, but it does also include wine. So all tractors at one time were repairable if you had the skills and tools to repair the tractor. There were no artificial limitations to you repairing the tractor or other farm equipment that you had. And this was a wonderful time for farmers because they had all this power. If they learned the skills, if they had the tools, borrowed or otherwise, they could fix their farm equipment. But tractors today are increasingly proprietary. They have a lot of other things that the tractor manufacturers have added, primarily through software. And I will get into how this is LGPL violating software in a bit. But one way they do it is through what's called parts pairing, where if you have a replacement part, you can put it in your tractor, but it won't actually work until the dealer comes by and does a cryptographic dance to confirm that the serial number on the part and the serial number on the tractor are allowed to talk to each other. So this is one problem. Another thing is the apps. Now, tractors have a display which has some apps on it. These apps are proprietary. You cannot add apps. You cannot delete apps. You cannot change how those apps work. And there is also tools. There is the tools that you would use to diagnose and fix the tractor cost tens of thousands of dollars, available only to the dealerships. Now, the other thing is that these tractors and farm equipment, they talk to each other through a communication network that can get back to, say, the farmhouse or other places where you might be running other software. And at every point along the way, a certain tractor manufacturer is using wine to do this, and they're doing so in violation of the license of wine. Now, farmers here are locked in because they are not able to make the changes that they should be able to make to their tractors. And again, the software is involved in creating this lock-in. Now, I will share a few headlines here. You can all check these out later with the links from the slides. The URL will be at the end. But this is the tractor manufacturer I'm talking about. It is John Deere. They've been getting increasingly worse in their mistreatment of farmers. And so these are a few articles that describe exactly how this is happening. And so we're pretty worried about this, and we want to do something to help the farmers, to help the people who are affected. You'll notice at the top, the FTC is mentioned. This lawsuit was begun just before the recent regime change in the United States, so we don't expect a lot of additional work to be happening on that particular case. So that's partly why it's urgent that we act. So farmers are locked in. Fortunately, we've solved lock-in before, and we again have the tools to solve the lock-in problem this time. As I like to sometimes quote from a movie that I'm fond of, the future has not been written, and so we have a chance to write that future. But how does it work this time? What exactly are the tools that we have to solve this issue? Well, we do have a very big advantage this time, which is that wine is already in use. So John Deere has installed wine onto its tractors. It's actually done so using WineLib. And the way that it is doing so today, we have discovered is in violation of the LGPL. Now, the LGPL, because it is a capital L library, that's a defined term, which can also apply to programs and other software. But in the license text, that is the name under LGPL version 2.1. Users must be able to make practical changes to it. So this means that if you would like to make a modification to wine and have that modification be used in the same place that the program was installed before, that you are allowed to do that under the license. And this is what can allow us to get a lot of the software repair that John Deere has taken away through this license violation. So I'll just go into the text briefly. I'll just briefly say the first little bit here. And this text says, and applying it to the specific John Deere situation, if you, John Deere, distribute copies of the library, whether gratis or for a fee, like as part of the purchase price of a tractor, you, John Deere, must give the recipients, that is the farmers, the tractor owners, all the rights that we, the developers of wine, the copyright holders in wine, gave you, John Deere. So John Deere has taken wine, it has installed it onto tractors and other farm equipment, and it also has the ability to modify that installed copy and install those changes onto the tractor. Because it has availed itself of those rights, it must also give you, the farmer, the person receiving wine, whether that be on a tractor or something else, those rights. And the license goes into a few examples of how this is or can be implemented in the rest of the text. And then later on with this other thing that you will note that I and others at Conservancy quote with some regularity, they must also provide the scripts used to control compilation and installation of the library. So all the information you need to avail yourself of these rights. So we need to be able to make these practical changes, and conveniently these are the practical changes that tractor users, farmers, those who have purchased tractors have been making for decades already. So this is simply continuing the precedent of repairability in this farm equipment. And this time we need to get it back by enforcing the license. Now again, quoting from this same movie, there is no fate but what we make for ourselves and for the users. And in this case, the users happen to make or break the global food supply. So as an example, if a farmer needs to harvest a crop and there's a period of good weather ahead and their tractor or other farm equipment is not working, they need to get it fixed right away. If they cannot do that, then the crop may rot in the field and then they have a year of work that's just been entirely wasted. This is why farmers need the ability to fix their equipment themselves. Now, the farmers did have the tools, but these tools were essentially taken away. And this is not because they didn't have the rights to this, but it's because of the things that the farm equipment manufacturers, and particularly here I'm talking about John Deere, did, including this violation of the LGPL. Now, we have seen over time that when farmers have the ability, they will fix, repair, improve their farm equipment, and they will learn a lot of things to make this happen. A lot of farmers are mechanics because that helps them a lot in doing their farming. I believe that a lot of farmers, including my father, would be software developers if they had the access to actually do something with that. But they don't because of LGPL and other copyleft violations. And here I'm mainly talking about John Deere. I have not exhaustively researched other tractor manufacturers. So I think giving them the tools will bring this back. I think we can give them back their tools, that farmers are very resourceful, that they will use these tools, and that they will be much better off because of it. Now, we need you to make this happen. So you may recall that Bradley was at the last WineConf 3 years ago, and he talked about very similar topics. I'm here today because things have gotten worse since then. As you can see from some of the headlines that I put on the screen earlier, John Deere's behavior is getting worse, and we need to do something about that. I'm getting regular inquiries from right to repair organizations that are telling me, hey, you know, we're trying to fight this John Deere problem. Like what are you doing? Is there not a violation of a software license going on here? And the answer is yes, there is, and we definitely do want to and should do something about this. So the way that we would like to do this, and because it's been so long, we think there are likely no other options. We will have to sue John Deere. And the way that we intend to do that is through a copyright case. And so to do a copyright case, we do need copyrights. And what I would like to propose is that for anyone who is interested in helping us out, that you would consider assigning your copyrights to us. We would be the plaintiff in the case, and we would use those copyrights to assist in this case to ensure that John Deere is complying with the terms of the license and giving the farmers the rights that they deserve and the rights that are granted in the license. And so I would encourage people to take a look at this form if you're interested. We're, of course, happy to discuss that, Bradley and I, with you. We'll both be here for the entire rest of the day, and I'll be here tomorrow as well, in case you happen to be around then, and I'm very happy to chat about that if people are interested. Now, of course, it's not necessarily always the case that you own your own copyrights if you've done work for another company, for example. I just wanted to briefly note something that Jeremy said at the last WineConf 3 years ago. And Jeremy, you can correct me if I misquote, but my recollection is that Jeremy said, if you feel strongly about being involved in this, we can talk, referring to providing you with your copyrights. And he went on to say, it's mainly it's not that I oppose it. It's that we want to mutually understand what's what we're doing with the copyrights. And so I think this is really important, and really it's very amazing, I think, that you have such a wonderful organization through Code Weavers, where you can have these discussions. And so I would strongly encourage people to start having those discussions if that is the situation you're in. If you own your own copyrights, of course, we're happy to chat about that, and you are free to assign those if you like. But anyway, that is what I wanted to chat with you about and ask you about, because I think we really do want to make things better for people through the work that we do. I think it's not fair that John Deere mistreats farmers and essentially uses wine to do it. They need to be held accountable, and we would like to do that to help farmers, to help the world. So thank you very much. Yes.
Two questions to that one. Is it known which version it is? Not that somebody gives you the copyright to their code, and that might not be included in on the tractor.
So yeah, the question was about which version of the code of wine is being used. So we have not exhaustively analyzed every single piece of John Deere hardware because they're quite expensive. But the one of the pieces of hardware that I was looking for in the past couple of years was using Wine version 5.0.2. So that is an example. They may be using newer versions now, but they've at least used that version in the past.
And the second question, as far as I know, I cannot assign my German copyright because I'll keep my copyright. It's like that's how German law works. I think.
Yeah. My understanding, I'm not a lawyer, neither is Denver, it says on the slide. My understanding is you can assign the exploitative right and not the moral right,
Yes.
and we would only need the exploitative right for the enforcement anyway.
Yes.
Are you guys aware of the consumer rights wiki and the Lewis Rossman campaign?
Yes, we are aware of the Consumer Rights Wiki and Lewis Rossman and the people like Kevin O'Reilly who also work with Lewis. And in fact, those are the people I'm talking about. They come to me and they say, "Hey, what about John Deere?" And so yes, we absolutely want to make this happen. They're doing their own work in different avenues to try to make changes, for example, with this parts pairing, cryptographic dance that is pretty abhorrent to me anyway. But what's that?
Apple is pretty good at that.
Right, exactly. Very similar to what Apple is doing as well with their parts. So absolutely, we chat with them often, and we're approaching things from different angles, which are both very necessary.
How much do you hear the claim, true or not, that this parts pairing is an anti-theft measure?
So the question was, how much do we hear the claim that parts pairing is an anti-theft measure? I don't know if I've actually ever heard that claim. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that John Deere would make a claim like that.
That's to my knowledge, the claim that Apple makes.
I see. Yeah, I mean, if Apple makes that claim, I'm sure John Deere would play from that playbook too eventually.
Is there much risk of, I don't know how critical the systems that run wine are to these tractors. Is there much risk that they could sidestep this? I mean, yeah, that might be a good result anyways, but I don't know. I don't know how the tractors work. Are they all, like, are they just .NET developers who are using wine to deploy, or is it?
So the question from Jeremy was roughly like, how is it installed? Like, what does it look like on the tractor? And probably there's a follow-up. So I'll just explain that part first. So there are a few ways it's installed. So one of the ways is in what you might call in a car the infotainment system. So there's a display in the tractor where you can do a bunch of different stuff, like see a map of the field and the parts that you've been to, etc., things like that. So that display runs Linux with WineLib and John Deere's recompiled Windows applications on it. There's also a communications module that allows that display to talk with other farm equipment and uses like 4G LTE. And so that module also runs Linux and has WineLib and these other Windows applications that are recompiled for wine. So yeah, those are some of the ways that wine is being used, and those are the components where we would see the ability to open that up.
Another thing to note is that system that's like inside the farmhouse that kind of is connected to all the devices and stuff. I mean, that's really no different than a desktop PC with a big display. I mean, it's custom hardware, but that's really what it is. And our understanding, we don't know for sure, but from independent research, we believe what was happening before is John Deere had developed a bunch of applications for some Windows platform, possibly Wins, possibly Windows NT, something of that mixture. And they invested a lot into the software development. They have software developers on staff that know these applications that were written for Windows. And they suddenly discovered that running like Windows NT or Wins or something is not as good as running Linux underneath. And that is our belief of why they got interested in wine.
And remind me again why we go after BusyBox and not the Linux kernel? Because aren't they in violation on the Linux kernel too?
So the question is, why don't we go after the Linux kernel or other components? Why is it wine? I think I think there are a few reasons for that. One is that it's important to use as many copyrights as possible to increase our chance at this. Conservancy does hold some copyrights in Linux, so you know that. But it's just the sort of thing where we've learned again and again with lawsuits, we just need to have as much as possible to increase our chances. So I think that's a big part of it.
And you're referencing the BusyBox lawsuits that we had long ago. One of the problems we had when we just went with BusyBox, which we'll never do again, was we didn't have any leverage to get them to comply on the Linux stuff. Because we were bringing BusyBox copyrights, we literally had one of the companies, it was Bosch actually, come into compliance just for BusyBox and not Linux. They gave us the ability to recompile BusyBox, install it into a temp file system on the device, but gave us no source code for Linux. And we had to give in because we weren't bringing Linux copyrights to the table. So our concern would be if we brought only Linux or only BusyBox copyrights to the table, they would comply with those and say, but we're not going to comply with wine because you didn't bring any wine copyrights to the table.
My understanding,
Sorry, can we take a question from the back? There are quite a few back there. In the back, the maroon shirt.
Yeah.
Sorry, next to you. Yeah, thank you.
So I heard that like GPL v3 has the clause against like lockdown hardware, but GPL v2 doesn't, and that's why also like why the kernel maintainers don't want to switch to GPL v3 because they are not against lockdown hardware, or at least they want to tolerate it. How does this interact with or is my understanding of the situation wrong, or how does it interact with this case?
So the question was about GPL version 3 versus v2. I'm assuming like an implied question about GPL, and also noting that there's one Linux developer. I'm not sure if there are any others who's indicated that they might not want to enforce in certain cases related to install or lockdown. So yeah, I mean the GPL v2 and v3 are actually quite similar on this point. And I think in particular the LGPL version 2 really shows you, through some of the text that I noted that the installation is absolutely required. It's required to work, and so that's how I would respond to that. And did you have?
Yeah, so I was there at the drafting of GPL v3. There is a lot of FUD and confusion about that. There was a lot of political theater in the Linux community on this issue that Denver was referencing. And actually, if you could pull up, can you just get my T-Boization article so you can see the URL?
Sure.
So I wrote an extensive article answering this question, which I would encourage you to read if you want to read more about this, because it is a very common confusion, which is why I wrote this. Unfortunately lengthy, but it explains the entire history and every nuance of the question. And I've definitely will throw it up. And I'm actually going to make a short URL for that.
Yeah, here, let me.
I will make a short
let me
URL
move
later.
this
You
out
can
of
just
the
search
way.
for it now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, over there.
Yeah.
You.
I just wanted to ask, what's the best case scenario if you win a case that wine can be replaceable in these tractors and nothing else? What would farmers gain from that?
So the question was, what's the best case? Like if the farmers could replace wine but nothing else on the tractors. So there are a few different ways that we can ensure that John Deere complies with the copyleft of other programs. And we think that is something that we can do either through having other copyrights like the ones that I mentioned in Linux, or through other means that I'm sure lawyers could tell you more about.
And right now, these Windows executables that are the applications, the only ones they're allowed to run because they're violating the LGPL are the ones John Deere provides. If we get full compliance with all the LGPL and GPL software on the device, they will then be able to make their own ecosystem of other types of applications that interact with this hardware. John Deere does not want that to happen, obviously, because they want everybody locked in. But if they wanted everybody locked in, they shouldn't have used copylifted software.
Just to add to that one, wine provides its own EXE, so if some application brings its own wine, they would add their own apps as part of the wine part. So you could still load them.
Yes, another question in the back. Gray shirt. Yeah.
So there's a chance it's nothing to use a cryptographic keys. I mean, like, it gets you to where you can replace the software, but it doesn't solve the problem of they've encoded modules that have cryptographic keys to communicate with the modules. All this solves is just let you put your own software on the, doesn't solve the hardware.
Sorry. Only lets you put your own software where?
You're set. So you get them to publish the source of wine, but this doesn't solve the parts repairability problem.
So you're right that it does not solve some of the problems, like the parts pairing, depending how they implement that, may not be solved by resolving this violation in the LGPL. That is a good point, but I think it does get us a good part of the way to solving the things that we can, such as being able to install your own apps onto the display and other things like that.
Yeah, another important thing to note is Denver's been building this really, he's a modest person, so I'll say this for him, has been spent years now building a coalition with all these other rights repair folks who are working on all these other issues. And we've had meetings with the FTC, well, back when the FTC was going to work on it, and other folks who are working in other areas. And this is part of a larger concerted effort. We're the software side of it. And we're being asked by these other people, like, you got to get in there and solve the software side so we can work on the hardware stuff.
Yes, go ahead.
What the map service, what map data those maps use? Do they use OpenStreetMap data?
The question was, what data do they use for their map service? They use OpenStreetMap data. That's a good question. That was not part of the analysis that I did in terms of determining the software license compliance concerns, but it's a good question, and we could investigate that if you think there are ways to use maybe OpenStreetMap licensing to assist with this.
CC BY says they won't copy it.
Yeah, well, there's also like database licensing
that's true.
and
That's
some other
database
things.
license.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Two-part question. One, do you already have any copyrights assigned from wine? And two, is there a minimum number of contributors for amount of code you need to enforce it? Or is it just the more is better?
Well, it's kind of as with anything to do with the legal realm. Again, I'm not a lawyer, etc. But the more you have, the better. And so I think as much as we can get would be extremely helpful in this. Like we don't need all of the copyrights of every contribution in wine, to be clear. But having a large number would help a lot.
Yeah, the key thing is if it's so little that John Deere could prove they could take some Git revision of wine, put it all back together, rewriting all the stuff that we had as part of the case, that is a dangerous scenario to be in. And those arguments will get made. We had them we learned this in the BusyBox case. One of the most innovative things we did in the BusyBox case was show you don't need 100% of the copyrights, just enough that there really is no way for them to yank them out and still have the program be usable.
Yes, go ahead.
Have you considered like the other solution, like a public shaming the company at the moment? I mean, it seems to me that the farmers are, when they buy this equipment from John Deere, they're not making an informed decision about how repairable is the software, right? So, I mean, repairable software, but how easy to modify. So what if you just give a certification or something like that to the companies that actually do have that in place? So if the consumer makes a more informed decision, and maybe that's the way to fight this.
Yeah, so there was so the comment with the question was, could we not do some sort of public shaming campaign, perhaps on the flip side, also doing some sort of certification process so that farmers can more easily know which tractors and farm equipment are complying with the license and which are not, which will not give them this software repairability. I think, unfortunately, public shaming is not working. I think John Deere is so big that they just don't care. Like you've seen the articles that I listed there, like they just keep on doing the same thing, essentially. Even recently, like they may make some move to do something in the way of repair, but then they go back on it or otherwise make things worse like a year later.
Yeah, I agree with everything Denver said, and I think we've been doing public shaming for like 3 years now. Against John Deere, us and all the right to repair folks have been. And there's Lewis Russell's YouTube channel brought up lots of places. And the other thing I want to mention is one of the things the FTC was interested in was they were looking into whether John Deere was approaching being a monopoly in the United States. So there really isn't anybody out there to certify because John Deere is controlling the market. Now, sadly, I do not think, due to the regime change, that the FTC is going to continue with that investigation, which makes it all the more reason we have to do something.
Yeah, to briefly add to that, it varies a lot by market, but my understanding is in the US market anyway, John Deere has approximately 80% of the market for large farm equipment. So it's very difficult to say, oh yeah, just go somewhere else. Yes.
Who else are you talking to about this? Because like, while like having the wine source they use me, like it would enforce the license, it would be a big thing. The problem is if they, for instance, are checking cryptographic signatures on the programs they're executing, it doesn't matter if you have a wine source code. You can like compile a program for this ecosystem, but you can't load it. It's the problem of sideloading that we have with iPhone and Android devices, where it's not a requirement in the US for the programs to be sideloaded.
Well, I just want to note here that so the comment is about if they give some source code but not the ability to install it on the tractor, like is that not complete? And then the example was made of Android devices, I'm guessing with locked bootloaders, or that disallow side loading. And so I just want to be clear that the vast majority of Android devices are violating the GPL. If you are not able to unlock the bootloader and install your own modifications to Linux, that is a violation of the GPL. So I just wanted to start out with that. I think you had some comments.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you have me annoyed. I said this on recording, but we might as well announce it, Denver. The LGPL is a better license than the GPL. And the reason why is because of the fact that you're allowed to mix it with proprietary software, there is a lot of requirements about installation. If you read that section about like you have to either be able to put the .so files over top where they were before, or you have to have object code to relink and reinstall. That's extra verbiage in the LGPL, which is there primarily to handle the fact that you're allowed to mix it with proprietary. But it bolsters the idea that there has been a misinterpretation of both the LGPL and GPL with regard to lockdown. And again, I refer to that essay, which I'm going to make sfc.ngo/TiVo go to that article soon.
Yes.
Would it be enough for you to own the copyright of AJ?
Sorry, the copyright of
You can't work around that code.
It would be, but we're not going to ask him publicly right now.
Let's maybe do one more question and then we can take it to.
Okay, yeah, I apologize because I think we are over time here. So anyone who wants to raise a question can, please. To ask a question. Okay, go ahead.
Did John Deere give you the source code of wine? Is this purely an installation problem, or are they also hiding the source code?
Okay, so the question was, did John Deere give you the source code for wine? Is this purely an installation problem, or are there other things? John Deere did what most GPL violators and LGPL violators do when we initially contact them about a violation, is they provide us something that is a bunch of C files and other things, and then when we type make, it quickly arrives at an error, and it is not clear how to fix this error. And so, yes, we have a bunch of C files, but it does not produce anything close to compilation and installation, which, as I noted, is required that the scripts used to control compilation and installation are there. And so yes, we are missing a lot.
That's what I forgot to mention. We brought Conservancy swag. They're creative, I think, hand sanitizers. Now, I'd love to say we did this because we're cleaning up GPL violations, but the reason we did this was all my idea. This size hand sanitizer disappeared from the supply chain during the deep pandemic, understandably, and I was so excited you could get it again. We got a bunch with Conservancy. So I'll put it back there and feel free to take one. And they're refillable from other things, so you know it's totally usable.
So thanks very much. Really appreciate you having us here to talk about these important things. And Bradley and I will be around for the rest of today, and I'll be around tomorrow if you want to chat more about this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.